The revolution is real, it's live, and as some comrades say, it's lit, right? lit, lit, lit. Real, live, lit, lit, lit. Right? The revolution is lit, lit, lit.
Uhuru, comrades, and welcome to today's Omali Taught Me Sunday Study, live with the leader of the African nation, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. For today's study, we'll initiate a two-part discussion on the tactics and strategy for Black liberation, first presented by the chairman at a Black Organizers Conference in April of 1977. You can find the study materials located in the Facebook and YouTube descriptions. We'll begin first with an overview to establish the significance of this presentation and its purpose. Then we'll have a reading of the document with Chairman Omali Yeshitela, along with some discussion. Before we begin, make sure to like and share this video on the platform that you're viewing from. Let us now begin with our overview, the political aspects of building a mass movement, the tactical and strategic objectives for Black liberation. So as mentioned, this was first presented at a Black Organizers Conference at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst in April of 1977, and it was written as a general and uniting strategy for the African liberation movement in the period subsequent to the U.S. counterinsurgency against the Black Revolution of the 1960s. The party has always followed these tactics and strategies, which lays out how to answer the question of all the political work, the question of to what end? So what do we do all this for? And the participants included at this conference was Comrade Ella Baker, Robert Williams, Akbar Muhammad Ahmed, and many others. So tactics and strategy lays out guiding principles for building a strategic mass movement leading to the African Revolution. Mass movements are characterized by short-term tactical interests and often arise spontaneously. So we look at, the different instances of, African resistance rebellion that happens like after the murder of Mike Brown in 2014, after the murder of George Floyd in 2020. So you can see kind of these things pick up throughout, and this happens, throughout the world. So this is what mass movements are characterized: short-term tactical interests and often arise spontaneously. And the chairman writes that we must build strategic mass movements based on long-term interests through a coalition of the leading pro-independence forces. A strategic mass movement must better the lives of the African working class. So we see here that the work of the Uhuru movement, the African People's Socialist Party, in building mass movement has created institutions, and we'll talk about this more, the concept of dual and contending power, that actually works to respond to and improve the conditions of African people in the process of fighting to overturn a social system that imposes those conditions on African people in the first place. Our movements must be based on the premise of the struggle against colonialism, not racism. It has to be centered on the question of the colonial mode of production, understanding what this is and how it affects, impacts, and how it's shaped the whole entire world. And this helps the direction for our organization, our movement, where it is that we're going to go, is based on how we understand the world and what we understand the fundamental problem to be. If we understand the problem to be racism, the ideas in the heads of white people, we're stuck with politics like integration and, in ways in which, we can make white people like us or, see us as human beings. So this is what the struggle becomes around versus the struggle for power, to feed, clothe, and house yourself, to be free, to, have access to and control over your own resources, your own labor. These types of things is what the struggle against colonialism allows you to do. So this is very critical, that the premise of the struggle has to be based on one with the understanding of colonialism, colonial mode of production as the central problem, the thing that we are struggling against, the thing that has created the misery, the death and destruction that we see throughout the world. This is the core of the contradiction that we have to struggle against. And when you understand that premise, your organization moves and establishes a trajectory based on those aims. So principles for building a strategic mass movement projecting long-term aims includes: 1, win African people to the position of political independence. Establish the leadership of the pro-independence movement. And our targets must be the white ruling class, the Black petty bourgeois neocolonialists, the ideological imperialists, the white left. And these forces all have an interest, all have a stake in maintaining colonialism, maintaining the colonial mode of production, maintaining this relationship of bosses and workers, colonizer and colonized. And these are the forces that we have to struggle against, because these are the enemies, the real enemies, of our struggle, standing in the way of African freedom and independence. These are those forces. So again, our targets must be the white ruling class, the Black petty bourgeois neocolonialists, and the ideological imperialists, the white left, those who even sound radical, look radical, talk that talk, but at the end of the day, have a stake and an interest in keeping, this relationship and, with between colonizer and the colonized. So it's very, critical that we identify who these forces are, what they look like, because these are the forces that we're ultimately struggling against. So number 3, we have to win support for the independence position within current U.S. borders. So other colonized people inside the U.S. And, this should be of no secret that the land in which we're having this discussion on today in the U.S., based in St. Louis or St. Petersburg, or where we're having this discussion, that this land is stolen land, stolen from indigenous people. That genocide, a near decimation of indigenous populations were committed here in this land, what they call the so-called North and South and Americas. This is stolen indigenous land. And so these forces are struggling against the same social system that that saw Africans snatched from Africa and brought to the US. So this is something that we have to also win in terms of the support and win the position within current U.S. borders with other colonized people. So this, helps to explain our relationship, for I think it's like 40 years now with the Mexican Liberation Organization, Uniendo Barrio. So these are, very important relationships in building and winning the independence position within current U.S. borders. 4, create dual and contending governmental power. So we're back, to this point of how the work that we do within these mass movements have to be working towards bettering the conditions of African people. And we have to create dual and contending power to eliminate the relevancy of, the colonial mode of production in the lives of African people, being able to seize the means of production, being able to feed, clothe, and house ourselves, right now and creating the institutions that would allow African people to do that. So the dependency of, the colonizer and their system, we can cut that off. And, this is also helps us to establish the pro-independence position within the African working class itself. So we have projects like the Black Power Blueprint, which is one of the most obvious iterations of this, the strategy of dual and contending power. But this is something that the African People's Socialist Party has carried out, through much of its existence. And we see here on the left a picture of the World Tribunal for Reparations to African people. This is assuming, power in our own hands, being the government, state power in our own hands to be able to, issue out a consequence to the verdict, that we come to in response to the genocide committed against African people. So these are part of the dual and contending programs and institutions of the Uhuru movement, of the African People's Socialist Party, which through the process of building the movement and winning independence is actually transforming the lives of African people in the same process. So create dual and contending governmental powers. And 5, expose the oppressive nature of the U.S. government. And so we see here the Free Desi Wood Smash Colonial Violence campaign. We have the Arrest CPS campaign that is spearheaded by one of our organizations, the African National Women's Organization. And we would even say and I know we're going to mention in just a moment, the Hands Off Uhuru campaign, where we have a situation where the U.S. government through the FBI attacks Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party for organizing for the freedom of Black people, and that this has been made illegal, within the U.S. for Black people, and it always has been the case for Black people to struggle in our own interest. It has been made illegal, and we can show how, the basic democratic rights that it's presumed that Black people have. Being in this country are constantly violated. The right to free speech, the right to freedom of assembly, the right to a freedom of association, those things, do not apply to African people. And we can continue to expose this relationship, this nature, and this history of the U.S. government and the oppression of African people. You do not have to look far. So we wage these campaigns to continue deepening that, to expose it, to shatter any kind of illusion, that the U.S. government could hold any of Africa and African people's genuine interests, that our interests are, outside of what, the U.S. government is doing to our people every single day. So we have to continue to expose that. That's what the mass movement has to do, through this process. And that's what the Hands Off Uhuru campaign allows us to do right now. So win international support for the independence of African people. And this is, again, the international support, because there are, people throughout the world struggling against the same majority of the people on the planet struggling against the same social system, the colonial mode of production that locked the whole world into the same economic parasitic process. And the people of the world are struggling against that. And it's our responsibility not to fight and work in isolation or like in a vacuum away from the rest of the world, but to join in with the struggles of the people of the world, to unite, on the basic premise of anti-colonial struggles and things like that, to be able to, again, increase the power of, this movement right here. So the chairman, throughout the history of this movement has traveled all throughout the world to pull together forces struggling against the same colonial system, in order to build support, in order to build this solidarity for African independence, for the movement that's fighting for the liberation of African people. So we have here the chairman with the Irish Republican Socialist Party as an example of that work, that decades-long work that has not stopped even up to now. And in fact, it's that work that, part of that work, which is something that we've come under assault for by the FBI. So number 7, build the African People's Liberation Army. And I just, want to express that, this organization is not a pacifist organization. And, we understand that this social system came into being through extreme violence, and it is maintained through extreme violence. And the colonial state, the military force that carries out, the brutality, the terror of African people every single day to maintain that relationship. So we have an understanding of what it takes to make this struggle, to win this struggle. And part of winning that struggle is building the African People's Liberation Army. And you've seen examples of this throughout history. You have the Mau Mau, the Kenyan Land Freedom Army. You even have we can look at Vietnam and the Vietnamese Revolution and the People's Liberation Army. So we can start to envision what this would look like for African people. And I mentioned again, the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa campaign is a part of the tactical and strategic objectives for Black liberation. If we look at all the points that are required, to in terms of building a mass movement and defining the strategic objectives and aims of that mass movement, we can look at Hands Off Uhuru as a standout example of this. That we are exposing the U.S. government and the oppression of African people. We are uniting with peoples around the world and within U.S. borders to this position. We are winning African people to pro-independence, to be able to struggle in our own interests. And and to struggle to be free, and that it's the most logical, just, rational thing for African people to do, who are brutalized and who have been beaten down by the system for 600 years, to struggle against that system and to struggle against those conditions. So we are uniting, all types of social forces and people throughout the world, to the position of hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa. And, in that, I just want to call on people to support and join this movement and join this campaign if you have not already, to be a part of making this pushback, this fight back against the U.S. government, against the FBI, as they attempt to isolate and attack, this movement, to crush our movement once again, as they did in the 1960s. So, we have, here on the screen, the website. You can go to handsoffuhuru.org to learn more about how you can be a part of this campaign, to join, forces with the Uhuru movement and the forces throughout the world, who want to see these types of attacks end on the struggle for Black liberation. So this is what I can say in terms of an overview for the tactics and strategy for Black liberation, again, presented by the chairman in 1977. And we can see the success, of this presentation. Wasn't just something that the chairman said, in 1977 to sound brilliant, but it's something that he made manifest in the real world. We are involved in the tactics and strategy for Black liberation right now as we have this discussion. So it is my honor now to introduce the leader of the African nation and the International African Revolution, the author of this presentation, Tactics and Strategies, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, to take us through this document and deepen this discussion for us. So Uhuru, Chairman, welcome to the program. And
Uhuru, comrades, I'm a bit distracted because outside of our center now, someone in a very high-powered vehicle just doing donuts. And this seems to happen every Sunday when we're getting ready to do this or some other kind of work. I don't know if it's designed to be something that would initiate a confrontation between us and some mysterious force or not. But anyway, that's the basis of being a bit distracted right now. And of course, the distraction is in the wake of this ongoing aggression, as people who are involved in this study probably know, most of you do, that this ongoing aggression by the colonial state, the FBI, against our party, against our movement, against our revolution. And I do want to remind everybody of that. We've gone through a situation where on July 2nd, 2022, someone pulled up in the parking lot of the Uhuru House in St. Petersburg, Florida, and went to the trunk of his car. We know this because we caught it on video. Went to the trunk of his car and pulled out a military-grade flamethrower and torched the red, black, and green flag, a 15 by 25 foot red, black, and green flag that that is resting on a 50-foot flagpole, torched it, burned it. And, even after we dealt with that, at this moment, we expected some kind of state involvement, but did not, enough had not happened in that fashion to inform us better that something organized was at work. 27 days later, on July 29th, was the morning pre-dawn raid on the Uhuru movement, my home, the homes of other comrades who are in our movement, and the statement by the FBI while we're handcuffed in the night that some kind of warrant had been established for a Russian national, and that my name was mentioned in the warrant, and our movement. And our movement mentioned in the warrant, and that this was the basis for the attack. And then later on, and this came with battering rams and grenades around the properties, not only at my home, but at other offices and homes of people in the movement. Then following that, we struggling with this and organizing around that. And ultimately we would create the Hands Off Uhuru campaign that you are familiar with and probably are participating in some fashion or another with. And then subsequent to that, in October, we engaged in buying this church. We've mentioned this before, but I'm not quite sure people really envision what we were talking about, especially in the African community where I have usually done work. This was an extraordinary building structure. It wasn't a ritzy church or anything like that, but it was a big church, and with all kinds of spaces that could have been used for programs for the movement, the Black Power Project, the national offices of some of our mass organizations would have been housed there. We started this, I think, in October. We even had the building under contract. This is October. Then October 31st, the end of October, after one of the events we had for the community on Halloween, one comrade Timber was taking down the decorations at our event space, and he was arrested by two armed forces, law enforcement forces, who said that he was arrested for making terroristic threats, guns, the whole bit, the whole routine they use against African people. And then he was taken to jail. He was held for 2 weeks. We couldn't get him out of jail. Sometimes the lawyer couldn't find him, couldn't get charges, an understanding of the charges. And then finally, he is visited by FBI agents who said that we know this is a garbage charge because they had charged him with making terroristic threats. And they knew that this was garbage and it was not going to turn into anything. But what about Russia and the Russians? And this was, the kind of discussion that they had with him. They held him for a while, had to get money, get lawyers, what have you, to get him out of jail. And then on January 17th, I think it was, the church that we had on the contract was set afire. So we had a flag burning on July 2nd. We had the attack on our offices and persons on July 29th. We had the arrest in October that I just mentioned to you, and then in January, the flag burning, the church burning rather, and this is right across the street from my house. This is when the so-called when the fire department arrived. The fire department connected with the same so-called public safety organization of the police department. The fire department was parked right, the fire engines parked right in the spot where the armored vehicle parked when they came to raid our home. So, I mean, this is kind of stuff that was happening. And I wanted to say that for a number of reasons. I was going to mention this in any event, but I was just explaining, you know, you can't know exactly what it is. I know with Huey P. Newton, at one occasion, this was learned subsequently, that he was living off Lake Merritt in Oakland, California. And in this, big apartment kind of building, that it was in some of these FBI documents, they talked about how they purposely, consciously caused a disruption in the hallway outside of his apartment. And the objective was to lure him out to see what it was that was going on. He didn't come out. So whatever they would have done, we don't know. We just know about, from Freedom of Information Act acquisitions, we know that they had done that. And so that's what I mean, with this madness that's happening with the donuts and, out front and running around and around and around, at 5 o'clock in the morning, they're there with the FBI in front of my house. But this is, an example of the possibilities of just ongoing kind of FBI propagations and or other forms of intervention. So I just wanted to say that. And I think it's important. I think it's important that we recognize, first of all, I really want to send, per usual, a shout out to these wonderful African comrades, brothers and sisters on the continent of Africa itself, where just incredible work under sometimes extraordinary difficulties to build our party and build our movement. That work is occurring right now in a very important kind of way, I think, under the immediate leadership of Comrade Tafari McGarry, who is the primary organizer for Africa on the continent. Comrade Tafari is located in South Africa, as they call it, but he is responsible for most of the work that happens. And so I from time to time, I see I get notifications from one of the various platforms. I don't know if it's Instagram or probably it's the, I've forgotten now the platform they use for most of the work that they do. But I see that the activity is happening, and I know that they overcome difficulties and that they are organized to participate in this study. So I just want to send, special salute to Africa on the continent of Africa, in the various locations where the party is active, where we are working, from where we are attending this study, and where we are taking the work to build the party and to free our people, to free our Africa, and to make this Africa that gave birth to human life and human civilization capable of prospering, to recreate this capacity for life-giving, as opposed to simply being this entity that where all the life is being sucked out of constantly, permanently, by a social system that has come into existence at our expense. Just want to salute you, comrades, and salute some of the brothers and sisters who are particularly in the Caribbean, many instances having to confront with some of the infrastructure problems, but not so severe as in Africa. There's no place that I can think of where the level of extraction of value is as severe and permanent and grotesque as on the in the mother country. But you brothers and sisters, I know in the Caribbean, I know you are there in Grenada, and I know you are there in Jamaica, and I think in Trinidad, I know in Barbados and Bermuda. I just want to send a salute out to all of you, comrades, and I know that French-speaking Caribbean as well. So just want to recognize you and salute you and hopefully encourage you to deepen your commitment even. The work before us is extraordinary. And this attack, this aggression they're making on us is precisely because of your significance, precisely because of what the African People's Socialist Party has brought to the world. Comrades, salute you, those of you in Europe, many of whom live in Europe and Africa, with our family members are still on the continent of Africa in various places, and in Congo, for example. I know that many of the comrades in the work from Congo, and who are especially in France and other places, and of course there's Benin. There are so many places where we're doing work in Ghana and Sierra Leone and what have you. And I just want to say that the work that you are not alone, and you must always recognize that's the significance of being part of the African Socialist International, and that the things that you have to do as an individual to try to survive, and now these things are unnecessary, certainly to be done as individuals, and that collectively we will build our movement and we will free our Africa, and that's critical. And those of you who are living in two places at one, where in France, and then trying to do what we need to do in Senegal and what we need to do in Congo and various other places. The fact is that we're going to make it possible for all of us to go home, and on the one hand, but also to recuperate everything that's been stolen from us in the other places that we've been forcibly dispersed to, especially within Europe. And but I just wanted to say those things. That this study that we're engaged in today is a consequence of first the party some 5 years after our founding in 1972, and we had just been going through various kinds of work, and the party came together, was built as a consequence of uniting different forces who were already doing political work. In many instances, the key of them was Jomo. Jomo had created the newspaper that functioned in many ways to pull and identify and to create people with the same more or less worldview, and to initiate a process through using that newspaper to organize what would come to be the African People's Socialist Party. So these are people who were trying to do work. These are people who were barely on the other side of the military defeat of the Black Revolution of the 1960s. King had been killed, Malcolm had been killed, Fred Hampton had been killed by the time we are talking about this, Lumumba and Nkrumah, just a whole, well, Nkrumah had been deposed, and just a whole bunch of this had occurred, and Jomo was involved in trying to pull together forces. Like, we were having regular statewide meetings with all the different organizations we could identify that had been on the same trajectory for self-determination against colonialism. And that was disrupted by the FBI. And so that process, we were initially going to build a statewide party, but there were some who we were able to connect with, like the black rights fighters out of Fort Myers. doing a lot of work with African migrant workers who were coming in to that arena from Jamaica, from Haiti, from various other kinds of places. Many of them ended up living in those areas, Belgrade and places like that. And Comrade Nyundu is on now. He's one of the founding members of the party because he was a member of the Black rights fighters. And one day we should get Nyundu to tell us a story, about that, and to tell us about our wonderful champion, Brother Lawrence Mann, who was a co-founder, who was the leader of the Black rights fighters. And then there was the group out of Gainesville, the Gainesville Black Study Group, that did more than study. They did that, but they were really active forces and doing all kinds of work. So we were able to pull them together. And this is in the wake of the defeat of the Black Revolution of the 1960s. So, and we were doing work around Dusty Woods. You will see some reference, I think, in this document to that. We were doing a lot of political work, but the question was, how do we build more? And so the party had commissioned me to write this paper, on tactics and strategies to build this revolution. And as I was working on this, I got a call from comrades who were building this conference, a Black Organizers Conference, it was called, in Amherst. I think this was an attempt to try to achieve some clarity because a whole bunch of forces were there, including the African People's Socialist Party. And they wanted me to do a paper on the political aspects of building a mass movement. So the party has me to do this as the party. When you talk about the party's objective is to build a revolution, what it takes to build a revolution. Everybody who came to this other thing that we were talking about, they were not parties, generally speaking. They were folk, some of them were academically involved and concerned, but some of them were really people who have been activists and like Robert Williams was there, who was the brother out of Monroe, North Carolina, who got fired as leader of this NAACP because he was arming the people against violent white terror, and actually was chased out of the country, lived in Cuba, lived in Vietnam, lived in China for a while, etc. Countries that gave him, places to go. That this is what these bridges are being intended to knock out, this whole accusations they make against us. And if you look at, as we go through this document, you'll see the significance of part of that. So they were there, but there was no party that was leading things. I mean, there was the African People's Party that was there, but there were no strategic goals. There was no clear theoretical foundation for the movement. And this was the problem the party was actually involved in trying to resolve. The fact is that we worked with the intent and actually were trying to build the party beyond what we were, the African People's Party, the All African People's Revolutionary Party, Republic of New Africa, as it was called, were three of the formations that we actually had tried to initiate discussions to build a single party from all of us. That did not work out. But the point that I'm making is that we were always involved in trying to solve the problems of the revolution, and tactics and strategies to make this revolution is one a big problem, the absence of them. And so we go to this conference as the party that's always doing work, already doing work, and whose theory is informed by the practice, and whose practice is informed by the growing development of theory that we are engaged in. So this is how we go to this meeting. And with an understanding that what we're doing is making a presentation that's more for these diverse groups. I mean, to pull them into the general trajectory and understand that we understand as the party that's going to make this revolution. Anyway, I want to say those things because we never really get into that kind of discussion to explain what it is that gave rise to what we have presented. So I'm going to go ahead and start, and I'm going to start with the preface rather. And I know that it's taken a long time just to get to this point, but so I'm going to go with the preface. The political aspect of building a mass movement, the tactical and strategic objectives for Black liberation, was presented in April 1977 at a Black Organizers Conference at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. Omali Yeshitela was asked by the conference sponsors to make a presentation on the political aspects of building a mass movement. And this was a really important kind of question that I think people were grappling with. There was an assumption at the time that there was, this really important, critical, what we characterize in the party as a pro-independence movement, a movement for self-determination, a movement against colonialism. And it was fractured more or less, but the forces were out there, and this conference comes together. I think that one of the goals of the conference would have been to try and create some direction for this struggle that had come under assault priorly to that. So this is our contribution to that from the African People's Socialist Party, without making a declaration that you ought to be in the party. So the political aspects of building a mass movement, the tactical and strategic objectives for Black liberation was presented in April 1977 at a Black Organizers Conference at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. Omali Yeshitela was asked by the conference sponsors to make a presentation on the political aspects of building a mass movement. During the same period, the Central Committee of the African People's Socialist Party had requested a paper from Chairman Yeshitela on the tactical and strategic objectives for liberation. So this was in April 1977. And I think it would be the next month. Was it May 1977 that, no, it wouldn't be. I'm trying to remember when it was that we ended up, it was in 1977 at the Desi Woods mobilization, September, wasn't it? Desi Woods mobilization in Atlanta, Georgia. That was one of the things that we saw as rehabilitating, reigniting, reunifying, and strengthening the Black liberation movement. But we'll talk more. So the resulting paper, The Political Aspects of Building a Mass Movement, the Tactical and Strategic Objectives for Black Liberation, was consciously written as a general and uniting strategy for the African liberation movement. It was approved by the African People's Socialist Party and has informed and guided the party's practice since then. And actually, much of what is in here was our practice prior to then, but it just hadn't been consolidated and given that kind of coherent presentation. The presentation at Amherst was well received and united with by the participants, which represented virtually every legitimate expression of the independence movement. They included Robert Williams, the first president of the Republic of New Africa, Reverend Charles Corns from Cairo, Illinois, who built the United Front in that city, the revolutionary nationalist Ella Baker, creating genius of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, representatives from the African People's Party and its founding member, Akbar Muhammad Ahmed, representatives from the Institute of the Black World, and many others. The presentation was serialized in August 1977, Volume 5, September 1977, Volume 5, November 1977, Volume 5, and January 1978, Volume 5. 4 issues of the Burning Spear newspaper, which generated much discussion in the movement, and letters to the editor of the Burning Spear, reprinted in pamphlet form in 1979. It has been one of the most often requested pamphlets from Burning Spear Publications, and it is long overdue for its 3rd edition. So at the time of this pamphlet's production, publication, which was printed, I can't see when the first time it was published, but so in dealing with this discussion, I'm beginning the pamphlet proper. In dealing with discussion, political aspects of building a mass movement, it may be useful for purposes of the discussion to begin with a working definition of a mass movement. It seems to me that a mass movement is one that responds to the deep-seated needs and aspirations of the masses of our people, and which consequently has the participation of a decisive sector of the African population. A mass movement should be distinguished from a party-type formation or organization. That's us. That was us when I made that presentation, talking to all of these different forces there. So a mass movement should be distinguished from a party-type formation or organization which may be doing mass work. For while a party-type formation or organization, if it is principled and true to its ideology and line, will always project a clear class position and project its ultimate aims in all of its work, a mass movement will not necessarily consciously project its ultimate aims, which is not to say that a mass movement won't. It is to say that you can't judge a movement by its own consciousness. People get involved in trying to deal with these struggles and what have you, and they define it a certain way. But what the movement is, the essence of the movement, the thing gave rise to the movement, can't be based on the consciousness, by the movement's own consciousness. None is this to say, and that's when we talk about the civil rights movement and people being involved in the civil rights movement, there was something at work that gave rise to the civil rights movement. We've talked about that and maybe reference some of it in this process. But as significant as Martin Luther King was and other forces, there were things that rise. There was a whole change that was happening in the economy of the world and in this country as well. There were whole economic factors and forces at work that contributed to this and to this thing that we call the civil rights movement. Why would there be a civil rights movement? That's a real question. Why would there be a civil rights movement? There's a civil rights movement because there's a sector in the population that is not respected. It's tainting constitutional Dred Scott thing that the African black people have no rights that the white man has to respect. And so dealing with that, if you're going to stay in this situation, then you're always fighting to have rights that the white man will respect. But here you are colonized, living on a damn plantation, right? And your struggle is not to get off the plantation, to destroy the plantation, but is to find rights within the slave plantation. And this is what much of our movement, even up to now, has moved to, but the point being that the people who are involved in the movement, the thing that thrust this movement, the historical forces, the economic and political forces that pushed this movement into existence didn't necessarily help to develop their consciousness. They have a particular understanding that's limited, and we'll see some about this. I hope I haven't distorted this thing up already. Okay. So none of this to say is that a mass movement will not have a class character. Nothing could be further from the truth. All political and social formations in this real world will have and project the class character. But the difference is that a mass movement will not necessarily consciously do so. It didn't consciously say, we're going to work to serve the interests of the petty bourgeoisie. It didn't consciously say that we're going to resolve this contradiction that exists between liberal capitalism developing and needing workers to come to be free, black people to be free to participate in the system to further our aims. It didn't consciously say that. It was conscious of that you can't vote. The white people jump on you all the time, and we're going to have I want to vote, stop the white people from jumping on me movement. Do you see what I'm saying? But that's the kind of stuff that will make people have a movement, right? The white people jump on them all the time, and if they believe voting is the way out, people will create a movement based on that. But you can't judge a movement based on the consciousness, but on its own consciousness. That's like judging me, based on what I think of myself. And I might be like James Brown, love myself, jump back and kiss myself. You know what I'm saying? But you can't judge me based on that. You can't do that. So this is one of the factors which may distinguish a mass movement from a party-type formation or organization. And as definitions do not only tell what a thing is, but what it is not as well, we must say, a grammatical issue here, that a mass movement is not a party-type formation or organization. Any political discussion of the political aspects of building a mass movement must continue to make the important distinction between mass movements and party-type formations. A lack of clarity on this question can seriously affect our political development and lead to unnecessary setbacks and political errors. For example, I recently had a discussion with a comrade brother who is a member of a political party that is presently committed to politics of non-confrontation. This political posture advocates no obvious leadership of the struggles of Black people against self-realized needs, and no obvious defense of the people against attacks by the U.S. North American colonial state. It was opposed to that, in fact, and people actually got expelled from the organization because they actually tried to do work. Their position was, what you're supposed to do is study, study, study. That's all they were doing, creating revolutionary intelligentsia in some pristine environment. Even your children have to be allowed to play on the floor and stuff like that. That's part of the way they protect themselves from certain kinds of disease, right? Build up an immune system. You got to get out in the world. According to the comrade I talked to, this posture was born out of concern that we do not become victimized by the mistakes of the Black liberation movement made around the period of 1967, when certain overt and sometimes ultra-leftist postures and utterances made it easier for the U.S. government to arrest and kill our advanced fighters and smash various of our militant organizations. You see that even now we're talking about this thing about the government attacking the struggle. And this is a really important discussion because, and this discussion, this pamphlet is based on trying to solve the problems of the revolution. And so this guy is saying you don't do anything but stay in the classroom. This is what we're referring to here, and et cetera. And for him, that's a solution to the problem of the government attacking you and things like that. That's for his organization. So it is correct that our comrades should be concerned that we do not make the same mistakes we made in the last period, but his error, in my opinion, the error of his party, is in confusing the last period with the present period and mass movements with party-type formations doing mass work. And this is a real issue. This is a struggle that we've had even within the African People's Social Party, even recently. The mass movement should not try to be the party in that fashion. And that demands and requires more discussion, because what it really requires is to understand how the party functions in mass movements and what mass movements are for, So during the last period, which was marked by mass upheavals of the people, we were witnessing mass movements of the people. Movements which were generally spontaneous and without the benefit of a Black political party, shaped by tested advanced fighters, rooted in the masses, whose political ideology, style of work, and expertise could provide direction and leadership, right? So this guy's upset about doing this, but we're saying, here's the problem that you got to look at: the party. that can provide tested leaders who can, for these mass movements to give it direction, etc. That's what the struggles we've been having recently, even in our own work. How do we function in the mass work? How do we build mass movements as the party? And it's really important because the people do build movements. We don't want to take the people's movements away from it. We want the party to provide leadership in those movements so that people can actually carry out their will with the benefit of the political and organizational expertise that we bring to it. Not to keep it from being a mass movement, but to provide leadership for it in a way that contributes to the development of more and more and more and more forces who have an elevated kind of revolutionary consciousness and education. So during this period, however, serious advanced fighters are struggling throughout the U.S. to build political parties capable of providing long-term theoretical and practical leadership for our struggle against U.S. imperialism. And there were serious advanced fighters running throughout trying to make that happen. This then is a major and fundamental difference in mass movements and party-type formations we ought to be constantly and consciously aware of. A genuine party-type formation will always be guided by long-term strategic interests, and all its tactical work will be guided by strategic interests. On the other hand, mass movements are characterized by short-term or tactical interests and are often spontaneous occurrences. Mass movements such as the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement are often victimized by a tendency to raise tactical objectives to the level of strategic objectives, thereby often becoming slaves of the urgency of the moment, which can, among other things, lead to ultra-leftist and adventurous acts. And this is part of what the US government is trying to impose on us in so many ways. The reason it's important for us to have existed for these 50 years or more as the African People's Socialist Party, because really concentrated in the parties is the history of struggles, resistance of the African liberation movement. We're not starting now. We didn't start when Barack Hussein Obama got selected or something like that. Or the latest person got killed by the police. We're the party. We have objectives. We develop tactics. Right? We have a theory that informs our practice. We have a theory. This is a thing that tethers us to the future, so that the future is always there for us, and it's not some short-term future, so that you destroy everything because somebody got arrested, and what the FBI would have us do is spend all of our money, all of our resources, all of our energies dealing with paying for lawyers, repairing damages they've done to us and things like that. And they would try to make sure that the African liberation movement does not have the advantage of a certain kind of political and ideological and organizational development. If you look at the history of the struggle of African people, certainly in the United States, you will see that the most significant revolutionary forces had a lifespan from 3 or 4 years of real significance. That include Garvey, that include the Black Panther Party, that include most of the so-called like revolutionary formations. So that doesn't give a revolutionary formation. It didn't give us time to develop ideologically, theoretically, to build a certain level of political maturity, experience, and what have you. But all of that is consolidated in the party, and that's what this pamphlet is. And that's why it's important for them to destroy us, so that the movement has no ability not only to see and project the future, but also to construct the process to get us there. And so what would happen if, given their druthers, they would push us into situations where your back is always up against the wall. And that means that if your back's always against the wall, you can't see long term. You're always forced, at this moment, do this, do this, do that. and not to carry out long-term mission. And so this is what they would have us to do. This is why they would try to push the African People's Socialist Party off the arena, because all kinds of things are flushed up to the surface right now during the struggles that you have. That will happen, but they have no experience. They have no political maturity. They have no organizational development. They have no tactics and strategies that informs what they do. So that's another 50, 60 years, if you will, that would be lost by a movement as forces try to develop this. We're not going to do this all over again. We're not on some kind of treadmill that we just keep running, and don't go any place. And that's part of the significance of this discussion that we're having today, and the significance of the existence of the African People's Socialist Party against all odds, and the determination, as part of the reason, the determination that the federal government has to destroy us as an organization, as something in that. With this experience, we have so much political and ideological and organizational experience. Even when we are small, you will find that even when we are weak and can't do the things that I would have us to do, given our ability, given what is the task, and given what our strategy is, there's so much we should be doing that we're not doing, and that would have us to do. So I'm not trying to erase any of that, but I'm saying the direction is here. You can go and find it. We put it in manuals. We rewritten it over and over and over again, years after years, from a continuum. So people can participate in a continuum. It's not just something that was born yesterday. You have a movement that would take us back 50 years, Black Lives Matter. What the hell does that mean? You know, it doesn't mean anything except that it's something that any liberal, any sellout, or any reactionary, even all colonizers can say that. You know, that's where we are now, as opposed to a revolutionary movement where people were fighting for power to determine our own lives. Look at the Black Panther Party 10-point program. Look at the 14-point working platform of the African People's Socialist Party. Look at the movement that was projected at this time. And this is what we're trying to deal with right now when we're looking at this pamphlet, because the party has always been involved in trying to solve the problems of the revolution. In fact, we were formed with the stated objective of completing the Black Revolution of the 60s, not going back, not creating a new civil rights movement, which is what some people did. As opposed to completing the Black Revolution of the 60s, they said, well, what we need to do is just have a lot of coalitions. So coalition becomes a substitute, if you will, for the needed instrument to make the revolution free the people, which is the party. And so what would happen, people would become extremely religious. They would find a new religion. This is a Black religion. This is Black idealism as opposed to white idealism, you see. So clearly then, during this period of intensive party building, our comrade brother and his party are incorrect in assuming the impossibility of confronting our imperialist enemy in the day-to-day defense and struggles of our people as necessary tactics for realizing the strategic objectives of our struggle for political independence and self-determination through self-liberation. That's what I said the struggle was for. It's important to say that, you know, because I go back to the false statement attributed to Harriet Tubman that she brought so many people out of slavery and could have brought a whole bunch more if they only knew we were slaves. Oh, well, that's a fabrication. But the point is that people need to know the nature of their oppression in order to fight against it to the conclusions, to good conclusions. If you don't know that you're colonized, you won't fight against colonialism. If you don't know you're colonized, then people have you off on all kinds of trips. I'm fighting because somebody said something bad about my mama. I'm fighting because any other kind of thing. I'm fighting because white people don't like us. I'm fighting, et cetera, et cetera. What the hell, if you're colonized, whoever heard of a situation where the colonizer
base the relationship on the colonized on whether or not they like them or not. The colonizers do like Black people as long as we stay in our place as the colonized. I truly believe that you could go to a Ku Klux Klan rally and find white people with Michael Jordan t-shirts on, harmless. Oprah Winfrey, they won't like Oprah because she's a woman, but things like that, so we have to know what it is that we're fighting for. This is why we make the criticisms. I'm going for another study. I'm sorry, I'm taking off on another study. I'm going to stop and try to follow this. Okay, so we're saying of this stance of this brother and his organization, not only is this an objective, right, opportunistic posture, a posture and tendency characterized by avoiding immediate struggle in the ostensible interest of long-range goals, a posture which objectively unites us with righteous politics in that it denies the value and necessity of struggle. It is also incorrect as a tactic for party building. For genuine liberation, or revolutionary or vanguard parties must be built in the heat of struggle. They must be formed, tested, and steeled in the actual combat with our class enemy and national oppressor. Combat, which is determined by our tactical capability, by our actual capabilities, concrete time and place, and our tactical and strategic objectives. So we're always fighting. You don't just fight any kind of way. So somebody will read something we said about this or that, and they say, well, see, that's what you said. Yeah, but we said that this is true under conditions. Like people say, we're going to have a march. It's going to be, 200, 300 of us. We're going to march here and there. Is this going to be a nonviolent march? Yeah. Because the police are there. Because the level of political education, development, and organization among ourselves and the masses of the people do not allow it to be anything else on purpose. I mean, you can be like some of the anarchists who have no objectives and just go out just to want to break a window. That ain't what we're about. We say all the time, we're not in this for the fight, we're in for the victory. We're not looking for a fight, but we say people have to be able to engage in this struggle, right? And that's a part of the development. So we say all attempts to build a party otherwise in the sterility of classroom situations or the false security of closet politics not only dooms our efforts to the mere creation of cults and sects, but also provides us with politically fragile formations which must necessarily fold and disintegrate from its first serious contest with our class enemy and national oppressor. One of the things that we could be doing as party and party formation movement is the connection we have with the people every day with the Bernardsville newspaper. That tells you something. If somebody can't go out and sell the newspaper, all this talk that they make about making a revolution and the kind of sacrifices and hardships that may be inferred, that are inferred for the advanced detachment. It ain't inferred for everybody, but certainly those who put ourselves forth voluntarily to lead our people out of this situation, then at minimum, you ought to be able to go out and propagate among the masses of the people. Now that we've made a distinction between mass movements generally and party type formations doing mass work, party type formations doing mass work, it may serve us to distinguish working with spontaneous mass movements, which means they are mass movements which do not project or not born of an attempt to realize long-term or strategic aims, from working with mass movements which project and which are born out of an attempt to realize strategic aims. So this statement does not appear contradictory. I would like to make this point. For advanced fighters, socialist revolutionaries, African internationalists, etc., all mass movements are tactical vehicles tied to a long-term strategic aim, tied to long-term strategic aims beyond the objectives of a mass movement. Like the objective of a mass movement might be such and such a thing, but that's not why we are participating in it. We have objectives that go beyond, generally speaking, like we participate in an election. And so the objective of people who might even be engaged in mass movements to build elections or this radical campaign or something, you know, for them, the aim is to get the person elected. That's a mass movement, you know, that has those aims. But for us, and sometimes what they did here in St. Louis, Ferguson, there were all kinds of people who mistreated our people and our movement and our struggle after the rebellion here. And they ran for office. And they were elected to office based on an assumption that they were connected somehow to the rebellion. So if that's your only objective, if that mass movement can only propel somebody into that situation, doesn't take us any further, and sometimes it takes us backwards, right? Then that's the part of what distinguishes the party's involvement in an election. It ain't even just about getting this person elected. It's about advancing the strategic aims of the revolution to put us in a better place dealing with the objectives overall objectives we've established for building the mass movement. You see, comrades? Yeah. So we say that I'm trying to see where I am now. So mass movements may be distinguished. Am I there? From the other by the fact that some mass movements may project strategic objectives unto themselves. That is to say, objectives which are realizable within the limited context and capability of mass movements, while others, which we define as spontaneous or short terms, may not do so. Yeah, the example that we just made. We get involved in elections for something bigger and beyond the election, while some people who even be pushed by circumstances, like look at Mississippi Freedom Party that came into existence after the struggle in Mississippi, after the especially coming out of 1964, when the Freedom Summer, the Fannie Lou Hamer, all of those organized those people, etc. But there's no, so it exists in Mississippi right now. But it is not a pro-independence movement. It is not something that takes beyond that space, that place. It is, you know, of some historical significance, I guess, in terms of the development at a certain time of the movement. So as an example, we may imagine the potential for a mass movement developing around the integration of schools. Such a movement may be honest in its intent. It would be born out of the frustrations of our people in acquiring a decent education and in response to the slavish philosophy of integrationism, which presently dominates our community. So you see, part of what what we're trying to do in this conference and with this paper, we're also challenging a particular line. We're saying we're trying to organize tactics and strategy for building a mass movement that connects the movement that is contending with the whole assimilationist, integrationist politic that's been imposed on our communities with the defeat of the Black Revolution of the 1960s. So such a movement would approach the question of education superficially and based on a perceptual observation, one which shows the inadequacy of so-called Black education as opposed to so-called white education. Such a movement would not understand the relationship of the post-World War II expanded productive capacity of U.S. industry and the subsequent demand for so-called integration as the best method for preparing Black workers for entry into the labor market. That's what the bourgeoisie is doing. That's what the liberals, Hubert Humphreys, all these liberals that we came to love so much, they're solving a problem for the colonizer in their approach to this question of education. And we have African petty bourgeoisie, liberal assimilationists who can come into a relationship with these forces because it solves their problem of integrating into the capitalist system itself as means of advancing their interests and careers. for the masses of African people. For that's why you saw this illogical thing that occurred, and they had to kill Malcolm to do it. They had to push even King out of existence to do it. They had to attack the revolution in order to get away with it. So you have this ridiculous situation that we find our people who are being beaten in schools, trying to go to certain schools, whose churches are being bombed as a consequence of that, putting forth this demand for getting closer to the beaters and the bombers, as opposed to being able to develop a capacity to defend from and create what we need in the process of defending from the beaters and those who are bombing our churches. It's the most illogical thing. So here you see African people who are suffering like hell from living in this situation, who are in these massive mobilizations, saying that because I want to live next to the one who's killing me. It's totally illogical for that, except it speaks to a particular class interest, and this is the African petty bourgeoisie. And make no mistake about it, I'm not saying that people could not be heroic in the process of making an error. We saw heroic force of people who risk life and death making heroic errors. We've known of people who are renowned now for flying airplanes, Black people for the French, fighting in the French Legion Army, and even in America in a very heroic fashion, but unwilling to raise a single fist, even symbolically, for African people to be free. In fact, entrapped by the notion, by the philosophy, by the idea that has come now to supersede the struggle for political independence, and that's the petty bourgeoisie that's leading our struggle. And so we see militant, heroic efforts, right, to keep us tied to the system. So we say that, again, so such a movement would not understand that education in any society serves the dual related purpose of providing the minimum necessary information and training prerequisite for efficient production, and as the ideological underpinning required for society. As you see this attack on Black history and all this stuff that's happening in the schools, I mean, I don't care what DeSantis, I don't think he's smart enough to necessarily understand what's at work here, except that it gets a vote, it riles up, like the masses of white people, et cetera, who are themselves experiencing certain kinds of contradiction, and as usual, are always mobilized towards solution to those contradictions at the expense of Africans and other people. Go war, kill somebody. I'm in pain. Let's go out and murder somebody, right? But the thing is that the education, let's see, where am I now? So the purpose, dual related purpose of education, providing the minimum necessary information and training, a prerequisite for efficient production, and as the ideological underpinning required by a society. What was required ideologically by the society of slavery? That's what you got. No kind of other kinds of education. Now that we have the need to bring Africans into the industry because of the expanding capacity of the United States industrial industry, subsequent to becoming a great power, defeating Germany and all these other countries, are becoming the headquarters of the world economy. Now we need somebody, this old timey thing that we had going on that had Black people just picking cotton in this other servile kind of back-breaking work, it won't help us. We need people in these factories. And we need to be able to open up factories in the South. And therefore, that's the thing that makes white people backwards in the South. That's the thing that would allow liberals to talk about the backwoods South and whatever, because they needed that. They needed black people in these damn factories. They needed in the North. They need to be able to leave and go someplace in Chicago and work in the factories. And they need to be able to open up factories in the South. Other than just the work that they've been doing with convict leasing, this has to happen massively. They got this greater productive capacity that's on top of what they've got from slavery. They've got this new situation of bringing all this stuff here, and you got to be able to do more than pick cotton. In fact, you've already helped them build something they call a cotton gin. You've helped them to build the way to replace you with cotton pickers. You know what I'm saying? Mechanical cotton pickers. So the thing that's happening, even in Florida and other places around the question of education, is that they have a new, this society, the colonial society, has a different requirement now, because the relations of production are being severely challenged. In a colonial mode of production, the relations of production are those that will lock the colonized peoples of the world into this process of producing for those who are the colonizers. This is the fundamental relation of production. And what is happening is this capacity is fast losing a place in the world. Peoples everywhere are struggling, and to the extent they are successful, they would do like China, and they would build their own capacity. And then you have Russia, who has never been a part of the capitalist economy proper, subsequent to the Russian Revolution. You know, you have all these forces who are contending now. And so what are you going to do with African people? You know, and in the United States, you got this movement of black people talking about, we don't want to do this no more. McDonald's is not good enough. You know, even Walmart's been pushed to raise the so-called minimum wage to the level that was called for by Bernie Sanders of $15 an hour. And they seem to have done it more quickly than Bernie Sanders was talking about doing, because he was talking over a number of years. That was his socialism. So what about the Africans? Right? And do we need to end the schools? And for the masses, that's truly not the case. And what has happened is we go back in many ways to something that we've seen in the recent past. Damn, I'm going off on another study. Anyway, so I will stop there. Okay, so we say that ignorance concerning the aims and purposes of education would obscure the self-defeating character of a mass movement promoting integration and would leave the movement struggling against the symptoms of colonial education. The high expulsion and suspension rates for African students, the humiliating treatment afforded to African students by North American professors, and the inferior education African students receive from schools which are located in our community. This kind of mass movement will be obviously guided by spontaneity, having no meaningful or realistic strategic aims, and forever being victimized and run in circles by tactical moves of colonial administrators who are committed to maintaining the colonial relationship which exists between our people and the U.S. North American state. And when we talk about spontaneity, it has been said in the revolutionary movement, and certainly from materialists and dialecticians, and like Lenin was one of the persons who really helped to promote and understand that spontaneity is the mother of opportunism. And I don't know if we want to put that on sisters or not. But the point being, and why is that? Because opportunism is sacrificing the long-term aims of the revolution for the benefit of the petty bourgeoisie. And that's why a to what end is so important. And why is it? That's what we mean when we talk about opportunism. When we talk about spontaneity, We're not talking about a spontaneous because somebody jumped up and had a demonstration right off the street. You may jump up and have a demonstration right now, organized, but that's not what we're talking about. Because if that demonstration that you have right now contributes to the strategic aims of the movement, even if the demonstration itself, the act is called spontaneously, that's not what we're talking about, although we do not like spontaneity. What we're talking about is movements that can go any kind of way because they're not tethered to long-term aims, right? They're not tethered. They're not guided. They're not informed by anything except we can do this. I don't like this. That kind of politics, you see. And I see that happening all the time. You know, I don't like this. I don't like them, kind of stuff. But, you know, and that would guide, you know, like what it is that we do. So we say that this kind of mass movement will be obviously guided by spontaneity, having no meaningful or realistic strategic aims, and forever being victimized and run in circles by tactical moves of colonial administrators who are committed to maintaining the colonial relationship which exists between our people and the U.S. North American state. So they can set you off on anything. You know, I was having this discussion about the struggle that happened in Minneapolis, where this brother was murdered by the police. And they got sucked into this debate. This became the real question, whether the brother was handcuffed when the colonial state murdered him or not. And the whole movement, he was handcuffed and they killed him, handcuffed and they killed him. And then the police came out and showed that he was not handcuffed. And so that, boom, there's the movement, because it degenerated into the question whether he was running circles. Running circles. That's what I'm talking about, how we, you know, maintain a certain kind of strategic focus. It's really important. I was talking to Comrade Jamal about that just the other day. Let's see where I am. So to do work in such a mass movement as we necessarily must, we have to do work in these mass movements, would require a different tactical approach than working in a mass movement with projected strategical aims. To work in such a movement would require that we unite with the movement in its aspirations to upgrade the education of African people, while at the same time using massive propaganda, educate the people to the correct nature of the contradiction, and criticize the present incorrect course of the mass movement. From this vantage point, while still showing unity with the movement, raise slogans and project aims which capture the true contradictions, thereby pushing the struggle forward. There's somebody who used to like to talk about when they first met us here in Ferguson, St. Louis. You know, we were involved in mass stuff by the people. And we didn't just stand aside and criticize, look at this, look at that. We joined it. And we struggled to help shape the course of this, to give it a deeper understanding of itself even. And we ran into the petty bourgeoisie. I got thrown off of a stage after being seconds into a presentation, what have you. But it may have been that same day, sometime close to it. You know, I'm in front of the police department. It was that same day. And hundreds of African people are surrounding me and uniting with what I brought there in terms of trying to take, you know, some science into the struggle and to give it a deeper character. And winning a relationship with the mass of people, because you don't win it all at first. You don't just show up someplace and everybody say, wow, you know, let's go with that necessarily. Although it was really interesting, my participation in the 8th Congress of the Pan-Africanist Congress, where the people were calling for me from the floor to take over the Congress. Some people have forgotten that. But the thing is, you want to establish the connection, establish the relationship. You have to be there. And so you work with it, you're on the go and go through certain kinds of struggles to take it to a different, a higher level. But if you just disappear, you don't have that ability. And especially when you're dealing with people, like people who come to these movements because they are passionate, they feel certain passions, they experience, an absolute need to get involved. And so you want them to be involved, and you want to be involved with them. And at the same time, you want to take them to a higher level in terms of their understanding. You don't smash them. You want to take them to a higher level in terms of their understanding. So when I say we must unite with the aspirations of such a mass movement, I mean exactly that. We cannot use the tactics of standing on the wayside and yelling from afar. We must be the most trusted fighters within the mass movement. The masses must understand our fidelity to our people and our cause. And this can only be understood if we are side by side with the people in the thick of any deeply felt struggle being waged. And I want to say this to all of our mass movements, all of our mass organizations. This is about this is about get there. If the people are there, be there. Unless they're in some capacity that can do damage or harm, to be there, participate. Principal unity with the movement would also generally require that our efforts be directed at winning the people rather than smashing the movement. Since struggle, even spontaneous struggle, heightens the fighting capacity of the people. The great problem is not so much the spontaneity of the masses, but rather it is one to be determined by our ability to give leadership to the people should spontaneous mass struggle develop. That's it. That's it. And that's critical thing that we're facing all the time, all over with the party. Certainly we're facing that here in St. Louis. Because the people want to struggle all the time. The question is whether or not there are party forces who can make that happen. Whether we have party organization. This is a critical thing that I'm talking about. When I say organization, I'm talking about organization that does the work among the people, raising the political level and the organizational level and organizational capacity, and winning those people to our movement and winning them into our party. There should be major uprising in any city. When the July 29th happens, there should be major uprisings. But you can't do it hiding in the closet and keeping your burning spears, just paying for your spears and not getting up and doing the work. So, however, the type of mass movement we want to talk about is not a spontaneous mass movement. The type of movement we are concerned with at this time is a mass movement which does project long-term strategic interests, one which is not built from spontaneous mass activity, but which has its genesis in ideological presupposition and political predetermination. We do that all the time. Sometimes it's not that clear because in many instances we work in a silo too. But the stuff that we do, it is based on having certain ideological assumptions and toward achieving certain political aims. The fact that we are concerned with building a mass movement is an indication of intent. Building a mass movement as opposed to simply working with a mass movement is an indication of purpose. And to the extent that such an attempt to build a mass movement is wedded to long-term strategic aims, as its basis in ideological clarity, designed to realize political objectives, and is guided by our advanced fighters, which is the party members, the movement will not be characterized by spontaneity and will be capable of advancing our general struggle for political independence through self-liberation. Any mass movement that we are building should have its basis in our attempt to realize our tactical and strategic objectives for liberation. In the last analysis, it will be our attempts to realize these objectives, which will determine the political aspect of building a mass movement. This is what I'm telling the conference that want me to come talk about the political aspects. I'm talking about the tactics and strategy. And we're saying this will help to shape and determine what the political aspects are. So our tactical and strategic objectives for liberation will help us determine which forces contribute naturally through their own self-motion to the realization of political independence. They will help us to determine which forces, although incorrect in their direction, are not hostile toward or antagonistically contradictory to our ultimate aims, and which may therefore be worked with. That's saying something about the politics now, right? That helps to say what our politics is going to look like based on what our objectives are. You don't just have politics. You have politics to carry out our objectives for victory. So depending on who we're working with, what we're trying to do, that's the thing that informs what it is that we do. More than subjective assumptions about the individuals that we may be working with, what are we trying to do? And we are trying to do more than win the election, aren't we? We are trying to use the electoral process to advance the struggle among African people massively for self-determination and to look at different other aspects of the task, the goals that we've established for ourselves. This is what tells me who and whether I can work with somebody. And they may have halitosis. Is that another way of saying bad breath? Or any other kind of problem. But that's not what's going to define this relationship. So our tactical and strategic objectives for liberation will help us determine which forces contribute naturally through their own self-motion to the realization of political independence. They will help us to determine which forces, although incorrect in their direction, are not hostile toward or antagonistically contradictory to our ultimate aims, and which may therefore be worked with. They will also help us to identify those forces which are hostile and which consciously serve the forces of imperialism and African colonization. In other words, in our efforts to build mass movements, we must be guided by tactical and strategic objectives for liberation if we are to separate what is historically necessary from what is historically necessary. I got something this morning. I saw it for the first time from someone I think is a friendly force. I think they may even support the Hands Off Uhuru movement. I had not seen this before. Yesterday, it revolves around anti-war, rage against the war, not you rage, rage against the war action that's happening on today, right? Is today the 19th? And it was something that was saying that we should not work with, support this particular mobilization that's happening on the 19th. And the reason they give for that is that this is a unity between right-wing and left-wing forces. And that, they have some good points in terms of opposition to the war in Ukraine, which much of this revolves around. But anytime you have this marriage between the right wing and the left wing, and the right wing got all this money, et cetera, who can set the course and what it's going to look like, and that they don't say anything about racism, et cetera. So, this will actually be a setback, they say, for what they call a peace movement. And it's hard to disengage because this is somebody who loves us, who likes us, and what have you. They want us to take a position on that. The Libertarian Party is one aspect of it, and I forgot the other entity that they identify as a main part of it. But the point they miss is this: that I don't care about their racism. If I did, I wouldn't work with any white left organization in the country. That's not the point. The fact is that the white left and the anti-imperialists and the peace movement have never, generally speaking, supported the Black liberation movement against colonialism, which has always been why it's been lily white. Why in the hell would African people dying in the streets of the United States on a regular basis every day and dying in our homes and starving and all this other stuff, where you got peace movements, right, that can be concerned about Ukraine and all these other places and not say a damn word and unite with the struggle of African people against this war that's continuous because it is a colonial war. And because they live on the same terrain and cannot recognize this is colonialism that we're looking at. So I'm not looking for a right-wing or left-wing colonizers. I'm looking to end colonialism and our relationship to it. If I had gotten this message earlier, I might have been able to respond to it, because I really think these are nice people. But the point that I'm making is, what are the long-term aims and interests of this mass movement and the mass work that we do? And our participation has to be informed by that. So don't tell me that you got a left-wing colonizer who we are beginning to force at least to articulate something, and they didn't do that voluntarily. We had to create the first the first African anti-war movement, peace movement in this country in the form of the Black is Back Coalition. But it's not just Black is Back Coalition for peace. Black is Back Coalition for social justice, peace, and reparations. That's what it's for. And we push and said to white peace people, you got to stop just being for peace in the abstract when it comes to us, and only able to deal with questions of war and peace when it's something that may, one way or another, draw white people or the colonizers into it. When I say draw white people into it, I'm talking about through nuclear Armageddon, through being drafted to go back to fight, or something to that effect. You can't do that. And so it's not that we don't like you, we love you to death. I should change that. It's not that we don't like you, but it is that our objectives are clear to us. That the tactics and the strategies for complete liberation against colonialism informs our politics and our tactics. Right? So anyway, I just think it's important to say that it's a new day. It's going to take time for some forces to catch up, with what it is that we're talking about with this realization. They call us right wingers and other kind of stuff. And, I've seen this happen before. I remember they criticized Marcus Garvey because he met with the Ku Klux Klan. And Garvey said, in his heart, every white man is a member of the Ku Klux Klan. You know what I'm saying? But the thing is, the same people who would vilify Garvey for meeting with the Ku Klux Klan was trying to have tea with the president of the United States. I mean, what the hell are you talking about? It's colonialism that we are fighting against. And our tactics and our strategies are informed by that. And it is also helps us to understand that the real left that we are interested in is a left that can unite in the struggle to defeat colonialism that kills Africans and oppressed peoples around the world. So we can have 2 million people march in France against the war early on. Anybody remember those kinds of mobilizations? But not a single one of them marched to push the French out of the places like Mali and other places in Africa where we are oppressed. Won't work. And it's really interesting because a lot of the anti-war people from the Vietnam era find themselves supporting the war being made against Muslims and Arabs in this country. And of course, the consequences were different during Vietnam, because to support the war that the U.S. was making against Vietnam meant the likelihood that you're going to be drafted. Your son's going to be drafted. And the Vietnamese were increasingly effective in enhancing the value of body bags. And you had all of these people coming back in body bags, and they had an objective material interest and getting the United States out of that war. Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam is going to win, right? This is what I'm talking about. So you didn't see the French doing that in terms of uniting with what was happening to Africans by France. Okay, so my point here is simply this. At the moment, we have determined our tactical and strategic objectives for liberation. We have completed our most serious task for determining the political aspects of all our work, including building a mass movement. Therefore, I would like to discuss briefly and generally what these tactical and strategic objectives for liberation should include as they relate to building a mass movement. One, we say, when the people, how am I doing on time? Somebody is watching this time, I know.
Chairman, I was actually going to make a suggestion that we stop right here. When people to independence.
Okay. All right.
We've got about 15 minutes remaining.
Okay.
So, okay.
Wow. 15 minutes?
15 minutes, but you've been on fire. You've been on fire.
Whoa. All right, let's go then. I really enjoyed this. I wanted this to happen, this study. So let's go ahead and move with it. With this, go ahead and take it from me, Comment Director.
Chairman, and I hate to, because there are people who are saying don't stop, and I don't want to be the person that stops you, but I just really want to appreciate this study, and I love it too, and it's just been so helpful in breaking through this piece. And I just want people to know we will be continuing this study around tactics and strategy next Sunday, so do not worry, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But we have to look at our announcements, because we want to let people know what you can do, how to get involved, what's upcoming, so you can connect with us. And also we want to address maybe one or two questions, depending on time, before we close out this Sunday study. So let's take a pause.
May I ask a question, Comrade Director?
Yes, Chairman.
I do want us to get through our agenda, but what are the things that prohibit going further? And I mean, practical terms, I know we're on the radio, we broadcast into Black Power 96, we're programming that's associated with that, right? And other things, right?
Yes, but I mean, we are, if we want to take it longer, we can go longer. I don't have a problem.
I don't know. Can I get a sense?
I mean, the people are saying it in the chat. I don't know what it's like in St. Louis, but the people are saying keep going. So
let me go may I take just another 10 minutes or so?
Chairman, this is your show. So
maybe just another 10 minutes. So we say that our first and most important objective should be to win Black people to the position of political independence. The masses must be won. If the masses of Black people are not won over to the position of independence, there will be no independence for Black people. It is as simple and clear as that. If we can agree that the masses of our people must be won to the position of independence, as a prerequisite for liberation, we can already see that we automatically begin to give political definition to our work of building a mass movement. It is obviously in our best interest to identify those forces within the dispersed African colony which are most sympathetic to the independence movement. And after so identifying them, we must win them, or a sizable sector of them, over to the idea of building a mass movement which meets our common strategic objective of winning our people to the position of independence. So we identify them and say, this is what we got to do. We got to win the people over to independence. You want to understand the existence of the Black is Bad Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations? This is part of it. When masses of people pull together as many African, we got 18 different organizations who are involved in this movement, who have united with a general trajectory toward political independence, against colonialism, etc. When we talk here of the need to win our people to the position of independence, it must not be assumed that our people are anti-independence or hostile to the notion of independence. Nothing could be further from the truth. Our problem here is that the independence movement has done too little in the area of systematizing and spreading a philosophy of independence, which would give us the kind of philosophical influence with our people presently wielded by the anti-independence philosophy of integrationism, anti-racism, so to speak. And even in those areas where we do put forward some philosophical clarity, we have too often failed or have been unwilling to provide consistent practical leadership for the day-to-day struggles of our people, which would give real meaning to the value of our philosophy in the real world. This is what takes us out of the damn classroom. When we talk about building a mass movement, then we are talking about doing so with the predetermined idea of realizing the strategic objective of winning our people to the position of independence while giving concrete and philosophical leadership to the self-felt and identified struggles of the people. And as we are discussing a mass movement which must be built, and the organized pro-independence forces are so few, we are talking about uniting with the greatest possible sector of the pro-independence movement for the purpose of building a mass movement designed to promote the common strategic objective of political independence through self-liberation. That's what we're talking about. And so we're talking about this needs to happen in general, but this is how the party has moved, recognizing what the strategic interests are. We have to win mass people to the position of political independence. Just having a discussion just the other day with Comrade Director Akile, and using the analogy of the false statement about Harriet Tubman. If they only knew they were slaves. And if people don't know they're colonized, how the hell are you going to win them to fighting for liberation? The best you can do is win them to fighting the petty bourgeois stance of finding a better way. And sometimes those petty bourgeois call themselves communists. And sometimes even black nationalists whose work is connected to these sometimes communists who are looking for this multinational racial solution that improves the condition of black people under a new white boss. Ain't that something? So we say, and as we are discussing a mass movement which must be built, I know I read that, and the organized pro-independence forces are so few, we are talking about uniting with the greatest possible sector of the pro-independence movement for the purpose of building a mass movement designed to promote the common strategic objective of political independence through self-liberation. That's bigger than just us. To the degree that our work is tied to realizing our tactical and strategic objectives for liberation, we are putting our politic in command. That's what it should say. And reducing the ability of personalities to play the determining role. We don't walk out of meetings because our feelings are hurt, for that would be rank subjectivism. We don't attack and shoot up fraternal organizations because of FBI-led maneuvers, for that would be eliminating our objectively, scientifically defined comrades. Our actions would be necessarily determined by a minimum of principle. For our main, primary, and most fundamental political objective now is to serve the people through realizing, to the best of our ability, the tactical and strategic objectives for liberation. So that's a really important thing to understand, you see. And also it elevates our struggle to this place beyond subjectivism. See, the anti-racist movement is a subjective movement. Based on how white people like us, we don't like white people, we have to act like white people, be like white people or not. You know, it's based on subjectivism, and white people are now put in the place of fighting against their own racism. You know, I'm fighting my racism, and take courses. A lot of black people, some black people make a lot of money with rich white people coming, paying them absolving them for absolution. Is that what you call it in Catholic Church? For absolution, right? Say it again. No, I'm not talking about indulgence. I'm talking about absolution, right? And so they can be free from any guilt because they went to this class. Here's my what do you call it? My certificate. I'm no longer a racist. Done my part, and I've done this, and I voted for Obama. What more can you want, right? It's based on subjectivism. And that's what makes it even complicated to have the conversation with the comrades who who sent us this information about the May 19th mobilization, because I think they really like us. But it ain't even about that. It's about achieving like strategic objectives we've established to win our freedom, right? A second and related, so have I exhausted my 10 minutes yet?
Well, Chairman, I would recommend we just continue reading until May be built through coalition, so we have a clean break.
Okay. A second and related strategic objective for winning liberation is to establish the leadership of the pro-independence movement. Now, I'm talking to forces now who in Amherst, who are supposed to be a part of this movement, anti-colonial movement, in general terms and what have you. Who are connected to this trajectory that we've been on for a while now, with the Black Power, when I lumped into a kind of pro-independence characterization. And what I'm saying is, why would I put that forward? Because I'm saying that the larger the group, the more significant the group that's involved in the struggle against anti-racism or against integrationism or against assimilationism, the more effective our work is going to be. We have more forces now who are battering on this door against colonialism. We need that to happen. We have to wage this struggle against colonialism. And so we're saying pulling all these forces together. That's what we've been working for 50 years, pulling all these forces together in the struggle against colonialism. So where am I? A second and related, did I say that? Yeah. So we want to establish the leadership of the pro-independence movement. So if you got to follow somebody, there got to be somebody who's against colonialism. Got to be somebody, Black Power, organization for that, et cetera, not this anti-racism stuff. And building our mass movement, then, we see that it must be designed to clearly demonstrate the leadership of our movement. We are helped further in determining the political aspect. It must be designed to show the political leadership of the movement. All of us are supposed to believe in this stuff about anti-colonialism, Black Power, et cetera. Then we have to have a strategy for achieving this. This is what the party is providing for the movement. This is the African People's Socialist Party saying this is what has to happen for the overall movement. Overall movement. So when you look at some other things that we get to quickly. So again, we see the objective of uniting the pro-independence forces as a political necessity, and we have articulated the basis for minimum unity, because this need to unite is recognized as a strategic objective. When we are about the business of building our mass movement, we are automatically armed with the political patience to continue struggling with principal unity, even with the most backward forces within the pro-independence movement. And then we say backward forces here are not the same as reactionary comprador trader forces, which might also be calling for independence, but which by virtue of their slavish relationship to imperialism would sink the people deeper into colonial bondage. And then we will finish this and follow the leadership of Comrade Director Akile. A mass movement then may be built through a coalition or united front effort of the leading pro-independence forces organized around general principles of minimum unity, with a basis in an attempt to realize a common strategic objective of establishing the leadership of our general independence movement. And I want to just say this, that we're talking about like a coalition. And sometimes you have united fronts. it's a normal thing in the war of struggle against colonialism, because colonialism oppresses the entire nation, not just the working class, not just artists and things like that. The whole nation is oppressed by colonialism. But the petty bourgeoisie cannot unite the struggle against colonialism. It cannot even pull together the kind of unity we are talking about here with the Black is Back coalition, even though there are petty bourgeois forces inside the coalition in terms of their aspirations and where they're trying to go. And that is because the petty bourgeoisie as a social force, looks out for its own interests as a class and cannot see everybody. But the African working class, under the leadership of its advanced detachment, must see everybody in the struggle against colonialism. You have sectors of the petty bourgeoisie who experience being oppressed. They can't get contracts with the government. They otherwise they can't see a future in the university for their children. There are all kinds of things that they're faced with. And so they want to end that stuff too, but that's all they want to end. But if we unite and pull all of this anti-colonial forces together, struggle, pull the nation together, and using all these elements to destroy colonialism, that's why it takes the African working class who can see the whole world and can understand the connection of its interest to the destruction of everything, the whole colonial thing. The African petty bourgeoisie could not do this. And sometimes they're smart. They're the petty bourgeoisie. They got more education than the rest of us. They have contempt for the working class, which is why they will steal everything that we say and everything that we're talking about now, if they can. And they got better. They know better how to be on social media. They know all of that stuff, right? That's the petty bourgeoisie. But the struggle has to be led by the class, the African working class. And the petty bourgeoisie, those, as a social force, the petty bourgeoisie will always, always, always betray the revolution. Even though there are elements within the petty bourgeoisie, right, who can be won to committing class suicide, right, and can abandon the interests of the petty bourgeoisie and unite with the interests of the masses of African workers and oppressed people. These are Fidel Castro was like that. Kwame Nkrumah was like that. Che Guevara was like that. These are V.I. Lenin was like that. Karl Marx was like that. These are people who tried to abandon the interests of the bourgeoisie or the petty bourgeoisie and unite with the interests of the class. But in order to unite with the interests of the class, that means you unite with the tactics and strategy for liberation. That means you build your politic around that. It is not just being most militant. It's not just knowing every damn thing and how to get more clicks and likes and that kind of stuff. Where the hell are you trying to go? And then it's not just recognizing that the African People's Social Party has some good ideas and stuff like that. And let's steal this and steal this and steal this and say the African People's Social Party's got good ideas. Because why don't you join? Why haven't you joined? And you haven't joined because you cannot unite under the leadership of the African working class. That's the real issue. It's a class question that's always raging within the struggle for national liberation, which is why the African working class under its most advanced detachments must lead the whole struggle, not just the interests of the working class, because the interests of the working class are embedded, part of the interests of the whole nation. And it's the nation. The nation must be viewed through the eyes, and the interests of the nation must be viewed through the eyes of the African working class. And only we can bring that. Otherwise, what you will have is the interests of the nation being viewed through the eyes of the petty bourgeoisie. And so we got independence. That's all we need. We got Mobutu here. That's all. No, let's get rid of Mobutu. Let's get Tshisekedi. Let's get some other force who's in charge. But the people never have anything. The people never have any power. That's what people like Sankara tried to bring to this agenda. So the interests of the working class, that has to be how we view the interests of the whole nation. So,
Heard, Chairman.
yes,
Uhuru.
you're telling me to stop, right?
I don't want to.
Okay, that's all right. That's all right. That's all right. I don't hear that often. What, Jesse? Okay, comrade.
Uhuru.
Take it, comrade Akile.
Thank you. I appreciate this, Chairman, and I do apologize. I don't
No,
want
comrade. Just make me be disciplined. I should have come in better prepared, so be more disciplined. I accept that criticism. But the guy there doing donuts in front of the Uhuru House was a distraction. We still got to find out why that happens every Sunday.
yes.
It's
Uhuru.
even dangerous to be out there because it's really reckless. When I say doing donuts, I mean recklessly doing that, and would frighten people. Anybody who's trying to come to the meeting would be frightened by that performance.
Yes.
And anybody in the building could be frightened because you don't know if they're going to hit a car come through the window.
Right.
So, all right, comrade. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you so much. I mean, it was such a powerful study. I just, there's so much that we want to be able to say and discuss, and we'll look at next week's program, how we're going to structure that, so we can look at some of the questions and discussion that came in through the chat section, because it's very lively. The people are highly engaged and really interested and enthusiastic about the discussion that has just occurred today. And I just really want to salute your leadership, Chairman, and everything that you said today. It was just extremely profound, and it's significant and important to just understand like what we have to do, who we have to be, how we have to organize, during this period. And anyway, so we could go on and on. And comrades, I also want to thank you for staying on with us, and just, all the excitement and everything that you're bringing to this study, just being engaged with us. Really, really appreciate your participation today. And again, want to let you know that, we'll be looking at your questions, the discussion that came from this meeting, and, for our next Sunday study. So I do want to go through quickly our announcements, just so people can see what's going on, and what we have coming up next, events and things like that. So first, join the counteroffensive to stop the FBI attacks on the African People's Socialist Party and the African Liberation Struggle. Donate or volunteer to the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa Defense Campaign today. For more information, go to handsoffuhuru.org to volunteer, donate, sign the petition, and sign the emergency response pledge. And on Saturday, February 25th, join the Hands Off Uhuru Defense Campaign featuring special guests Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Jalil Mutakim, while they discuss the centuries-long state attacks on the African liberation struggle, lifting up our African martyrs in the context of the July 29, 2022 violent FBI raids on party Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the Uhuru movement. This webinar is a fundraiser to build the legal defense for the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa campaign. You can register at tinyurl.com/HOU Fallen Warriors. The Uhuru Solidarity Movement is holding their national convention on Saturday to Sunday, March 11th to 12th at the Aquaba Hall in St. Louis, Missouri. The convention calls on white people to say no to the FBI's war on Black liberation. For more information and registration, visit uhurusolidarity.org. The All African People's Development and Empowerment Project hosts the Project Black Ankh International Conference on Saturday and Sunday, March 18th to 19th at the Aquaba Hall in St. Louis, Missouri. The theme of the conference is Building Our Own Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Response. For more information and registration, visit tinyurl.com/PBA conference. The African National Women's Organization will hold their annual convention Friday, March 24th through Sunday, March 26th at the Aquaba Hall in St. Louis, Missouri. For more information and registration, visit convention.anwouhuru.org. And make sure you like and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study, and support the Omali Taught Me show by donating at paypal.me/Omali Taught Me. Uhuru Tours and Speakers Bureau is an institution of the African People's Socialist Party that coordinates events and tours for Chairman Omali Yeshitela and other party speakers and leaders. Book Chairman Omali and other Uhuru movement speakers for your campus or organization now. You can email info@uhurutours.org burningspear.com or call 727-914-3621. And for more events, go to theburningspear.com/events calendar for things that were not mentioned here on this live, theburningspear.com/events. And lastly, comrades, brothers, and sisters, just want to say that this discussion is not happening, just, for our own benefit to hear, this brilliant presentation by the chairman, but it's a call to action. And the call to action here is to join the African People's Socialist Party. And you can do so by going to APSP.org to start that process, join the African Revolution, and build, this anti-colonial mass movement throughout the world to increase the influence of, the leadership of the African working class over the anti-colonial struggle. So APSP.org. And so, comrades, we are going to now wrap up this Omali Taught Me Sunday study. Very powerful. We will have our second session of tactics and strategy next week, so do not worry. This powerful discussion will be extended. And Chairman, before we officially close out, I want to just make sure you don't have, do you have any closing remarks before officially wrapping up today?
Only thing I don't remember whether you mentioned that on April 7th through 9th in St. Petersburg, Florida, where you are located. The Uhuru House that came under attack by the FBI on July 29th. The Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations will be holding our 7th annual Black Electoral School, where we'll be teaching all kinds of people how to participate in the electoral process in a way that advances the struggle that we've been talking about now for self-determination, for liberation of African people. And is also one of the bases for the FBI attacking us. If you remember, the election issue was one because we put on the ballot for the first time in history reparations. That's what you ran on the ballot, and that's why you're one of the so-called unindicted co-conspirators, Comrade Director Akile. So that's about what I would mention moving forward. Uhuru, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman. And comrades, you can see that information about the Black is Back Electoral Campaign School in the chat section. Information to blackisbackcoalition.org has been given there, and we'll make sure we have that in time for next Sunday's announcements. So thank you so much for this incredible discussion. And again, your leadership, Chairman, and to the Omali Taught Me Show team for helping with this production, and everyone tuning in, whether you're on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, or Twitter. Thank you for tuning in with us today. Thank you for staying longer with us today as we have to carry out this very important discussion. Make sure to follow the chairman on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study. Uhuru, comrades, vanguard up.
Vanguard up. Relentless.
Uhuru. Uhuru.